Chapter 6. Towards the end of 1987, the Nuestra Familia was no longer as concerned with the raza or with what was happening in the California prison system. Norteños were holding their own, and Familianos were once again able to focus their attention on the streets. On the streets, Familianos were instructed to reestablish themselves in all major Northern California cities, primarily San Jose, Sacramento, Salinas, and San Francisco. Their goals were to reinvent an NF presence, take over the drug trade, and rebuild the Familiano Bank. Familianos in each major city, hand in hand with other Familianos in the surrounding metropolitan areas, worked toward their ultimate goal, to establish a network of self-supporting regimental strongholds across California and eventually expand NF's influence to other portions of the United States and Mexico. NF was once again on the move, and this time the mob wouldn't allow anyone or anything to get in its way. Of course, this was easier said than done. A few of the obstacles experienced in the Stanislaus County area alone follow and exemplify the problems encountered in rebuilding these regimental strongholds. In or about November 1987, Pablo Boli Rodriguez, a Familiano parole from Soledad State Prison, was one of the many NF members assigned by NF leadership to start a branch in union with the regimental stronghold already established in San Jose. Rodriguez, originally from down south, was assigned to oversee all NF activities in Stanislaus County and Modesto, a region that NF had attempted to incorporate in the past and still wanted to control. Modesto was an uncontrolled area. There hadn't been an NF presence there for a number of years, and anyone assigned to it really had his work cut out for him. Rodriguez, who didn't know exactly what to expect, did know he had a very tall order. Once Rodriguez got semi-settled in the area, he began implementing orders. The first of many was to find NF prospects, recruit those with potential, and locate other NF members and associates in the area to function alongside him. Rodriguez located an NR member named Tomas Rock Bajaran, one who quickly became his right-hand man and enforcer, as well as the driving force behind building an NF presence, chapter, and stronghold in the Stanislaus County. Their main source of income came from the proceeds derived from armed robberies, burglaries, and home invasions. With NF approval and Bajaran in tow, it wasn't too difficult for Rodriguez to strong-arm his way into implementing a very powerful regimental stronghold. Rodriguez and Bajaran had numerous associates, and together they made a perfect. The two were very successful and eventually pooled their resources with another pair of NF members, Joseph O.G. Ramirez and his younger brother, Anthony Chato Ramirez. Both Ramirez brothers were seasoned soldados sent from San Jose to function under the authority of Rodriguez and his Modesto regiment. Rodriguez welcomed them with open arms. With this additional manpower, Rodriguez began building a regimental bank, a well-stocked arsenal, and his reputation, which in turn helped him expand his NF influence, authority, and the NF territory under his control. Little by little, Rodriguez became a very powerful NF leader, and although he was attempting to fulfill his NF obligations, he eventually became very self-centered. He became so self-confident that he began to stray away from NF's strict recruitment policies and became relaxed in the area pertaining to whom he allowed to enter into his inner circle. Along with the homeboys that Rodriguez worked with on a daily basis, he began to semi-recruit numerous Norteñas, female associates, to function alongside his crew, but under his guidance. Although it was nearly impossible for NF to exclude all outside assistance, most Familianos do not function alongside just any non-members, especially females, because true NF members consider them unreliable, weak, and a security breach. Nevertheless, Rodriguez viewed things differently, never guessing that his in-depth involvement with women would turn out to be a mistake on the part of his better judgment. One woman who associated herself with NF's regimental stronghold in Modesto and who worked for Rodriguez and his crew was Rosemary Rosie Levas, a well-known drug runner, heroin addict, and local prostitute. Levas, who knew Rodriguez and had hung around him for years, was considered loyal. There wasn't anything she wouldn't do for Rodriguez or the mob. She sold dope and her body, doing everything she could to help Rodriguez make money. Levis was a hustler. She was trusted, and she eventually received a small role in the NF. In addition to her loyalty, it soon became her responsibility to identify big-time drug dealers and set them up to be robbed by hardcore NF members. The setup scheme using Levas was ideal. She was sexy and an experienced prostitute who was more than able to arrange for a guy to get caught with his pants down. However, she had also made a name for herself and had become a law enforcement target. In late 1987, after being involved in numerous robberies, Levis was arrested and charged with prostitution, possession of cocaine, and providing false identification to a police officer. She was in trouble and she knew it. Not only was she going to be heroin sick while in jail, but there was a good possibility she'd be charged with robberies she helped commit. A conviction would mean that her children would be taken away from her. Levis decided it would be in her best interest to cooperate with the local authorities. She became an informer and provided eyewitness accounts of Rodriguez's illegal activities and her own involvement in them. To demonstrate how cunningly violent the ruthlessly avenging NF can be, within a week of Rodriguez's incarceration via unscrupulous lawyers, NF members practically knew the exact information Levis had provided as it was being provided. It was alleged that Rodriguez was subsequently charged with armed robbery and tried, convicted and sentenced to serve 10 years in a California state prison. A few weeks later, Rosemary Rosie Levas was shot to death in a low-rent motel room in Modesto. A NF member posing as a John set her up. Her lifeless body was found bound, gagged, and lying in the pool of her own blood. She had been shot in the back of the head in what appeared to be yet another execution-style murder. No arrests were ever made. If murders such as Levis received no particular notice, the public soon took heed as the dead bodies of NF victims continued to litter the countryside. In one highly publicized example, attributed to cold-hearted NF members, a return to the notorious 1970s was evident. In or about December 1987, a very well-known NF member, Edward Eddie Feliciano, was sent to NF leadership to operate in the Modesto area. Feliciano, along with a few other Familianos and NF associates, was instructed to pick up where Rodriguez had left off. He proceeded to establish a well-financed drug operation involved in numerous multi-kilogram sales of marijuana, cocaine, and heroin. Feliciano, who had lived in and dealt drugs around the city of Modesto for a number of years, was known on the streets as the man with the dope and the main drug supplier for the Stanislaus County. The majority of drugs sold in that area usually came from or belonged to Feliciano. By this time, he had long been considered a big money maker, known to have tens of thousands of dollars hidden at his parents' house. Word of Feliciano's success began to spread throughout the neighborhood. On more than one occasion, it was widely rumored that a variety of the younger wannabe gangsters were plotting to overthrow, rob, and if necessary, even kill him should the opportunity present itself. Not long after the rumors began to circulate, word on the streets was that the rumors weren't just rumors. They turned out to be true. The temptation of financial gain quickly lured two Norteño gang members, Arthur Art Flores and his twin brother, Anthony Tony Flores, into taking ill-advised chances. The twins, who knew Feliciano and had bought drugs from him practically all of their adult lives, had been in Feliciano's home on numerous occasions and were familiar with its surroundings. They also knew when the family would and would not be home. The Flores twins decided to burglarize Feliciano's parents' home. Sometime in or about January 1988, they did just that. The Felicianos weren't home during the burglary, so no one was hurt. Nevertheless, the thieves made off with over $10,000 in cash, a pound of cocaine, and a large amount of marijuana. Unfortunately for the twins, they were the last ones seen in or around an area near the Feliciano's home. A few days later, Feliciano and other NF members went looking for the twins, who were found hanging out at a local park. Once spotted, they were immediately approached, confronted, and allegedly dragged into Feliciano's car. It didn't take long for the twins to confess. Upon confessing, they hoped they would be released. They said how sorry they were and that they would repay every penny they'd taken. Their pleas fell on deaf ears. The twins were severely beaten, tied up, and driven to an almond orchard in the county. Feliciano said to have parked near an old water pump house and forced the twins out of the car. They were shot in the back of the head and left for dead. Their murders were later described as having all the telltale signs of an NF-style execution. The suspects were quickly narrowed down. Within a few days of the gruesome murders, the twins' bodies were discovered. Feliciano was charged, tried, and convicted of the murders. After his conviction, he was sentenced to death. As of the writing of this book, he's still on California's death row. In 1988, as the death toll continued to rise, NF members continued to demonstrate their willingness to eliminate any man or woman that got in their way. One or more memorable cases took place in Modesto when a Familiano named Jesse Chino Hernandez was released from prison in order to function in Stanislaus County, an order Hernandez was not too happy to follow. Hernandez, originally from Modesto, had no problem returning there, where he was well known, respected, and feared. Modesto was where he wanted to be, and it didn't take long for him to get settled there. On the streets, he was treated like royalty. He had it made, and it seemed he didn't have a care in the world. But he had an NF obligation to fulfill, and along with leading a criminal lifestyle would also come committing crimes. Hernandez heard Esther Posada, a local drug addict, had ripped off a drug-dealing NF member named Juan Padilla and his girlfriend, also from Modesto. After hearing what had happened to Padilla, Hernandez decided to get in touch with his old friend. The two had a short conversation, and Padilla informed Hernandez what Posada had done. Padilla told Hernandez that he wanted Posada killed and that her death would send a message to anyone who might think the NF was getting weak. Hernandez accepted the contract and was paid with money and drugs. A couple days later, Posada was located and kidnapped. She was taken to the country, shot in the chest at close range with a shotgun, and left for dead. As Hernandez prepared to leave the scene of the crime, he was confident Posada wouldn't survive. He was confident he had killed her, and he didn't bother to check her pulse. He didn't think twice before he got back into his car and drove away, leaving behind what he thought was a lifeless body. Hernandez was mistaken. Posada had played possum, and although critically wounded, she was still alive. She was barely conscious and didn't know where she was, in pain and laying in a puddle of her own blood. She knew that if she didn't get help in a hurry, she'd bleed to death. As her pain intensified, Posada faded in and out of consciousness, and she knew she didn't have long to live. The brave Posada, not knowing if or when help would arrive, accepted her inevitable death, certain she wasn't going to make it, and deciding if she wasn't going to live, she was at least going to make Hernandez pay for her death. She somehow found the strength to write a name in the mud: Jesse. The next day, a passing motorist driving home from work noticed Posada's body on the side of the road. The motorist called homicide detectives eventually found foot and tire prints that belonged to Hernandez in his car. Hernandez was also linked to this murder by a keen-eyed prosecutor who noticed the writing in the mud, and by an inside informant who had overheard Padilla hire Hernandez to kill Posada. Hernandez was eventually convicted and sentenced to death.